So here's the challenge. Imagine you could go to Africa to search for historical objects that would tell you about the history of the Christian faith on that continent. Where would you begin? You could go to Northern Africa and explore the roots of the Christian faith, but some of those places are just too dangerous right now, and in many cases, those objects have long since been lost to time. I chose to go to sub-Saharan Africa, to Zambia in particular, for two reasons. Number one, David Livingstone. Number two, friends. Our first stop was Lusaka, the capital city of Zambia, where I was able to meet with someone who's made a thorough study of the history of Christianity in this area, especially Zambia, and who's very familiar with David Livingstone. I'm here at African Christian University in Lusaka, Zambia. I'm here with Conrad Mbewe, and we're talking about the history of Christianity in this part of the world. How did there come to be so many Christians here in Zambia, in this part of Africa? So I want to start with this question. One of the main things that's brought me to Zambia is the David Livingstone connection. He was famously the first European explorer to discover Victoria Falls, and of course, since everybody else had given it a name, he gave it a name as well, and that's the name that has stuck. When he was here, there were really no believers at all, 0% Christianity. If you look online now and do a little bit of research, you'll find that Zambia is 85% Christian. How did that happen?
Yes, as you rightly pointed out, Tim, by the time that David Livingstone was coming into this part of the world, the Christian faith hadn't visited this part of the world. In fact, this part of the world was not even on the world map. It was some dark patch or empty patch. And so in many ways, David Livingstone, in crossing the Limpopo from the south and then crossing the Zambezi River as well, was also an explorer. He was putting together the various places he was finding and so on, and communicating all that back to England and Scotland, and that was now being put onto the world map and so on. So in that sense, he fulfilled that part of his responsibility. However, his real burden was to bring what you would have called civilization and Christianity to our part of the world. Civilization primarily because he was convinced that that would be what would stop the slave trade. As long as there was no other form of trade taking place and there was no protection by the powers that be out there, clearly the slave trade would continue.
As Conrad Mbewe already said, there was a time when the interior of Africa was unmapped. It was just a dark spot on the map. Nobody knew what was there. Livingstone dedicated his life to exploring it. And he did not do this because he wanted to be known as a famous explorer. He had higher motives than that. He was very concerned about the slave trade that was ravaging the interior of Africa. And he knew that in order to destroy the slave trade, he would need to find some resource and some way of getting that resource back out that would prove more valuable, more lucrative than the sale and the trade of human flesh. And so this was what he dedicated his life to, exploring the interior of Africa in order to destroy slavery. landed in Livingstone, Zambia, which is best known for being the place where Victoria Falls is, David Livingstone being the first European explorer to ever set eyes on it, and of course the one to give it its name as well. There are two museums in the world that are dedicated to the life and the legacy of David Livingstone. One of them is in Scotland, where he came from. Unfortunately, the one in Scotland has been closed indefinitely as it undergoes repairs, and so I could only visit the one in Zambia. But this one in Scotland has this great sculpture outside that shows one of the most significant moments of Livingstone's life, where he shot a lion and was then mauled by it, and he never recovered from that terrible injury. The other one is in Zambia, where he went to. So I guess one represents a bit of his background, the other represents his accomplishments. We're here in Livingstone, Zambia, and this is one of those museums. I'm very interested to see it. I know they've got some of his effects in there, but the website isn't quite up to par. I haven't been able to see exactly what they've got. So I'm really, really hopeful we'll find something in here that neatly summarizes his life, summarizes his accomplishments, summarizes who he was as a great missionary and as a great explorer. Let's go see what we can find. This is a real treat for me. When I was a child, I was given a biography of David Livingstone. I read it, I loved it. I've always had an interest in following in his footsteps. As I'd hoped, there's several of his personal effects here, some interesting and important things. His medical box, he was of course a medical doctor and then a missionary, and always he combined those two skills, those two callings. There's also his surgical instruments and its case here. And he was well known for, as he traveled, doing minor surgeries and helping people who didn't have the medical technology he had access to. There's his umbrella, his pistol, a few other things here, including his gun, his flintlock gun. And then really neat over here is his coat and his hat. So this is what he would wear, obviously, as he traveled, as he explored, and you may well have seen illustrations of him wearing something much like this. One of the really interesting collections of artifacts they have here are these cases that contain original letters written by David Livingstone. So they've collected them here, put them behind glass. You can pull them out and read them. They're hard to read. He was often on the go, writing very quickly, often by candlelight. I did notice on this one he talks about a forthcoming visit of the Sultan of Zanzibar. And in one way that was one of his great enemies, because Zanzibar was a great slave trading nation and Livingstone was absolutely committed to eradicating the slave trade. And so Zanzibar, being one of those countries that was most responsible for the utter devastation he continued seeing as he traveled through the inland of Africa. And so there's some significance to this one, as well as of course many of the others. Over here we've got Livingstone's traveling box. And so after he died, his body was sent back to England. This box accompanied the body. And this is significant because this probably would have been what contained his journals. The journals were what made him, they were what put him into the national and international consciousness. And it seems that he would set up this box and he would plant a candle on it, he would set his journals on it, and this is where he would do his writing, often kneeling over the box at the end of the day, writing out what he had seen. He was a phenomenal writer. If you've never read his journals, you really should try reading them. You can see why he was so popular. You can see how he truly wrote about what was going on in this place that nobody in Europe had ever experienced before. Very, very good writer. And then down here, there's a piece of wood that was taken from the tree under which his heart was buried. So when he died, of course, his followers, these two, Chuma and Susi, they removed his innards, partly out of significance, I'll tell you about in a moment, partly also because they had to dry the body to send it that distance back to England. But what they did was they took out his heart, essentially, and buried it there in Africa, believing that his heart already was in Africa. So they buried it there, and this is a little piece of wood from the tree under which his heart was buried. His body, of course, sent back to England and interred at Westminster Abbey. Now you referenced something a lot of people don't know, which is that David Livingstone's body is in Westminster Abbey in London, but his heart remains here in Zambia.
Yes. Actually, when he died, there were two gentlemen that had the task. They were serving him all along. and they had the task of now carrying his body back to the coast. And they were quite convinced, because there'd been so much with him, that this man's heart was here. So they did what, the heart is really not the physical thing, but they understood it as such. So his inner bowels, as it were taken out and buried under a tree in Chitambo village in northern Zambia.
And to be fair, they were clever guys. They knew the body had a long way to go, so that was just part of the drying process that would then allow the body to be shipped anyway. So it sounds odd, but it's actually, there is something really meaningful about it, his heart being here. You don't have to know anything at all about David Livingstone to know those famous words, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Those were spoken by H.M. Stanley as he and Livingstone met. Livingstone had been on this long journey, had disappeared into Africa. Stanley was commissioned to go and find him, and he did find him and uttered those famous words, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. The two men started to have great respect for one another, and this right here is a walking stick that was given to Stanley by Livingstone. So a neat little memento of the meeting of these two men. People rightly associate David Livingstone with his exploration. He was a great explorer, but there was a purpose behind his exploration. He didn't merely have a bad case of wanderlust. He was exploring for a purpose, and the purpose was he really wanted to open up commerce into the interior of Africa. There was a purpose to that. As he traveled, he saw the slave trade in operation. He saw these big lines of slaves all chained together, carrying heavy loads, being taken across the continent and then being sold into slavery into the New World. This absolutely broke his heart. This absolutely infuriated him. And he really believed that what Africa needed was commerce and Christianity. So they needed the gospel of Jesus Christ, but they also needed another source of commerce. They needed something else that would provide a way to live, a way to conduct transactions that didn't involve human flesh. And so he was always looking for these routes into the interior that could be used as highways, really rivers, that could be used as commercial trade routes. So he searched far and wide for that purpose. In this display, just around the corner from Livingstone's display, there's some of the implements that were used by the slavers. So there's a whip here made of hippo hide that was used to flog the slaves. There's some chains here, neck chains, that were used to chain people together. And then some of the beads that were used in order to purchase, to buy and sell different slaves. So heartbreaking material that shows the background to the sheer evil Livingstone was dealing with in his day. Livingstone was born in Scotland. He died in Zambia. He served in South Africa, first as a missionary, but these aren't the only countries that claim at least a part of his legacy. There's also Zimbabwe. So as you cross over the Victoria Falls Bridge from Zambia to Zimbabwe, you've crossed over the Zambezi River, which divides the two countries. And just on the Zimbabwe side, in the national park here, you'll find this statue in honor of David Livingstone. When Livingstone first explored the Zambezi River, when he first explored Victoria Falls, of course the first European to ever lay eyes on them, he had a dream that there could be a settlement at this place and that this river could be the highway out to the coast, and that perhaps they could find something to buy and sell in this area other than simply slaves. Desperate as he was to undermine and destroy the slave trade in this area. Sadly, what he learned only later on is that farther down the river there's an area that's not navigable, so that never could be the case. I'm a little bedraggled after my walk across the top of Victoria Falls here on the Zimbabwe side. We've settled into the Rainforest Cafe here. I've been assured that one of the local delicacies is crocodile tail. They offer it here, so I'm going to see what it's all about. You have crocodile tail in here? Mm-hmm. Could I try one of those too, please? Add it to my order?
Okay.
Thank you.
Lovely.
All right, this is crocodile meat. Local delicacy. We're going to try it. Say it tastes like chicken? Tastes like chicken. It's not bad.
What boss me? You know that.
I enjoyed my Zimbabwe experience, especially Victoria Falls. Went to a market, got some little gifts for my girls. Still need to find something for my son. He's a coffee drinker, so I try and bring him coffee from everywhere else in the world, and try and find something for my wife. We'll go back to Zambia and see if we can find something good there. This is the bridge back to Zambia. You can feel the spray here still of Victoria Falls. We're headed back to Livingstone, Zambia, finish up our time. Really looking forward to going to church as well. You can find a variety of views on David Livingstone today. Some people now regard him in very negative ways. I thought it would be worth asking Pastor Mbewe how he and maybe other Zambians regard Livingstone.
David Livingstone, put it in a nutshell, is highly respected here. The two quick things. First of all, when Zambia became independent in 1964, a lot of our cities were named after other cities and individuals out in the United Kingdom. When Zambia became independent, all those cities, towns, were changed to African names except Livingstone. Right. This is now over 50 years later. You never hear anybody say, hey, what are we still doing with a town with a foreign name? Nobody says that. Everybody still has that respect for him. Secondly, in 1973, which is 100 years after David Livingstone's death, various stadiums across Zambia were booked and were centers for worship services, interdenominational worship services, to thank God for the life of David Livingstone across the country. That was in 1973. I was a boy by that time. The most I remember was getting a T-shirt with the map of Zambia and David Livingstone's centenary and so on, which I wore, I suppose, for a few months. And then also being at one of those stadiums and seeing choir after choir, singing songs of worship to God and so on. I don't remember the same ones, but at least it shows that there's a real respect and appreciation concerning this man who God used ultimately to stop the slave trade within and bring about some sense of peace by encouraging mission agencies to come into this part of the world.
I wanted to see the kind of impact that Livingstone and other missionaries had made on this area, and so I headed to the north of Zambia. We're in Ndola, a small city in the northern part of Zambia. We're here to meet some folks connected to Central African Baptist College and University. Looking forward to meeting them, seeing the school, and seeing some of the work they do here.
Is the flight, Ellie?
You're good. Yeah.
Tim, how are you? Pleasure to see you.
This is my new friend, Phil Hunt, who has lived in Zambia with his wife and his 7 children since 1992. Since then, he has founded a church, a seminary, and an orphanage. I was asked to speak at the seminary and found when I was there that it draws students from many of the nearby African nations. This makes it a multicultural and multilingual place. I learned that some of the songs they actually sing in several languages in order to capture that diversity. Having explored the seminary, Phil drove us to Faith Children's Village, a nearby orphanage.
Glad to meet you. Stephen McCaskell. Okay. This is Makuka, Chilando, Greenwell. Just call him Green.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Good to meet you.
Welcome to Faith Children's Village.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is Faith Children's Village outside Kitwe, Zambia. I'm here with Phil Hunt, who was involved in founding it.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear what the vision was behind the village and what people should know about it.
Sure.
We learned that Zambia has one of the highest number of orphan children of any country in the world. Up to 27% of the children in the country have lost one or both of their parents. Can you give us a couple of maybe representative stories, just some of the children, how they've come to be here and what's happened with them since?
Yeah, the most recent one, just a few weeks ago, was a little boy that was left in a market in a nearby town, and the adult just told him to stand there. He's holding a little plastic bag and said, "I'll come back." And the whole day went by and nobody came back. And so the government got involved and they called us and said, "Can you please take this abandoned child?"
Yeah.
So he comes to a place integrated with a family that really loves him, and we pray that the gospel will set right those kinds of wrongs in his life. A little while ago I was talking to one of the girls that's a teacher's aide here at the school. I have a picture of her when she was 4 years old, sitting on the ground in her house, or outside of her house. And then just to interact with her, here she is, loves the Lord, come to Christ, been discipled, and is now a teacher's aide at the primary school. And I think that is really what the gospel does when it's received in the heart and believed. It turns darkness to light and ugly, sad stories to something that's beautiful. And praise God.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is beautiful. Obviously, my primary purpose is to learn about the history of Christianity in Africa, but it's such a blessing and such an encouragement to hear about how Christians are serving today, how Christians are making a difference in lives right now. This was my first journey to Africa. I really didn't know what to expect when it came to searching for historical objects or looking for evidence of what Christians are accomplishing today. In both cases, I was encouraged. I found a museum just stuffed full of objects from David Livingstone's life, and I found that traveling chest that so aptly summarizes his contribution. I found that he's still highly regarded for both his contributions to Christianity and commerce. And I spent time with believers who continue to carry on the long, long legacy of the Christian faith on the African continent.